Hi, I'm Fynnion, and this is the Nuzlocke Streak. Hello and welcome everybody to the Nuzlocke Streak, the killer Nuzlocke Streak, the Dead by Daylight Nuzlocke Streak. This is a Streak Challenge that I've been planning to do for a long time. I think I've planned to do this since I've done the episode on Chucky, right around the time that the unknown was being teased. I had the plan to start this challenge, but then I stopped playing for a while, and then a bunch of killers released, and then I had to catch up on those killers. And now it is finally time. Not too long ago, a couple of days ago, I made a little rant video, which you can see in the information box or in the description down below, about why I was postponing this streak. And that was because of the 9.2.0 PTB with all the gameplay changes that were tested. But yesterday, we got this little update that these changes will not release with the next chapter, which will be in about 2.5 weeks when it comes out. No, a little more. It's almost 3 weeks, right? Yeah, 3 weeks. A little less than 3 weeks, actually. So these changes will not come out. So I am confident to start this streak challenge now or currently, and then add the new killer when she comes out, and when I've done her baby killer series, which we'll go over in a minute as well. This video is sort of meant as an introduction to the streak and me explaining the rules, so I don't have to do that in every video, but the rules will also be in the description of every video, a little shortened version of the rules at least, and from there we'll keep going. Now, the very basis of the Nuzlocke Streak, it's sort of built off the hardcore series that a lot of killers and a lot of survivors have been doing, where if you lose a match, you lose the character you are playing. And we obviously have 40 killers currently. Very soon we'll have 41 killers, so in theory we have 41 lives. And my goal with this is just to see how many wins I can get with all killers combined, and how many wins I can get on each killer. And the rule set for this is going to be a little bit limiting, but not too much. I'm going to give you a little warning. It's about to become a little bit bright. I have 2 white pages to show you, and from there we'll keep going. So, first off, I have an important rule, and that is how I'm going to use perks. Now, I have written down every perk on the killer side in the game here, and given them a category. I have these categories up here. The first one is aura reading. We have slowdown, tracking, chase, hex, regression, obsession, scourge hook, utility, debuff, and endgame. These are the perk categories. And simple perks like a nurse's calling, which gives aura reading, will just be in the aura reading category. But things like alien instinct, which give aura reading and also debuff the survivors, will be both in the aura reading and debuff categories. Which will mean that if I run Alien Instinct, I cannot run another aura reading or debuff perk. So there's a couple of things that I had to make sure, which is things that are utility things and things that are actually chase things. The sort of rule set I went with is that utility is anything that speeds up anything the killer can do. So, for instance, Bamboozle gives increased vault speed, which means it's utility, but it also blocks the window, which can help in chase, so it's also a chase perk. Batteries included just gives movement speed around completed generators, so it'll just be utility. So here are all the perks. You have Blood Warden, which is an endgame aura reading, for instance. You have Call of Brian, which is regression and tracking, because it lets me know if somebody completes a skill check on there. Tracking is different from aura reading because tracking just gives a snapshot of the location and not actual aura reading. And then for instance, you have Enduring, it just reduces stun times, which I counted as utility and not chase. But then you also have perks which do a lot. Think about Friends Till the End. This gives aura reading on the obsession. It debuffs the obsession with exposed status effect. But if you hook the obsession, somebody else screams and reveals their location, which is also tracking. So this one perk takes over 4 perk categories, which will have to be, if I want to run this, we'll have to build the rest of the build around it. You think of a perk like Lethal Pursuer, if I can find it here, which gives aura reading, and as a passive effect, it increases other aura reading durations. But we can't run another aura reading perk, so maybe if we have a killer that runs aura reading add-ons, we can use this perk and still get some value out of the passive. Otherwise, it'll just help us at the start and then never again. Now, Hex perks and Scourge perks are interesting in that regard, that every Hex perk is automatically in the Hex category, but always also has another category, like Face the Darkness, which makes survivors scream. This is Hex, tracking, and it also aura reading. But you also have things like Know It, which is a Hex perk that gives movement speed, that gives survivors exposed, and it also activates in the end game. And then you also have things like Hex Devour Hope, which is a Hex that gives movement speed and also debuffs the survivors. So when you're running a Hex perk, it usually takes up a couple of categories, and then we also have Scourge hooks, which are always a Scourge hook. So these also have multiple categories by definition. And if you want to pause real quick, I'll just show you here. These are all the perks and their categories if you're interested in writing those down. And of course, when the new killer comes out, their perks will be added to this list, and I'll also add them to whatever category they belong to. So that is an important rule. I cannot run 2 aura reading perks because I don't want to be the guy who goes full win streaking on Nurse for a couple hundred games with 3 aura reading perks and a good regression build, or like a full regression perk. You know, I want to keep the builds well rounded, look for synergies within builds, and look for synergy with add-ons. But that is not the only rule. This is a list of all the rules. As I can see, the first rule is each perk category can only be occupied by 1 perk. So Lethal Pursuer and Nowhere to Hide, which are both aura reading perks, cannot be run together. The add-ons I'll allow is up to the blue rarity, so I can hopefully have some diversity and not just run the same add-ons all the time, or like just run the best add-ons, Eries and purples, you know. So I'm excluding these. Offerings, I'll allow any offering that I want to run. I can run Mores, I can run hook offerings. I'm just not gonna run map offerings. Now, as I said, I started this a while ago before the map offerings were changed, and back then I also didn't want to bring map offerings because that kind of takes away the RNG of playing like a stealth killer in an open map. Of course it sucks and we'll have to try harder, right? Very important is that I'll allow any strategy. Tunneling is allowed if I have to, camping is allowed, slugging, and 3genning. I'll allow it all, but I'll do my best to play a clean game of killer and not be too much of an asshole and just tunnel somebody out at 5 gens. One important thing I want to add is that if I break a rule unintentionally, there's 2 scenarios. If I discover that I've broken a rule, I can void the game. So I load into a game and I realize, oh, I have 2 obsession perks. I can void the game, either just leave, or I can let all the survivors escape for my mistake. And this will not count as a kill for as a death for the killer or a strike. But if the match concludes and I discover the rule break afterwards, the killer receives a strike. How do I consider a match part of the streak? Well, simply said, if I begin it with the intention of it being part of the streak. There's no situation where I can side in between if the game is going rough that I say this is not part of the streak. If I go into the match saying or thinking this is part of the streak, it's part of the streak. But since I'll also be trying to stream a little bit more, and I'm also in the process of getting a new computer that can actually handle playing a game and streaming at the same time. That will not be part of the streak, and if I do a viewer requested build or just want to chill game after a tough match, I will not consider it part of the streak. This is an important one for currently, but it might also be if this streak lasts longer than a few months and we get to January, where the next chapter is supposed to I believe. Then they may join the streak after the Baby Killer video has been completed, and I've practiced the kill a little bit, if there is still 2 killers alive. For example, Huntress and Knight are alive, and the new killer can join, but if just the Knight is alive, then the new killer cannot join anymore, and they'll have to wait for the next time I do the streak. Because I'm planning to keep doing this if I lose it and see how much I improve. Other things that I want to add is that if an obvious hacker ruins the game, or it is discovered that there was a hacker in the game is automatically voided. Any sort of death or strike is removed. So if a subtle hacker is also discovered after the match, the killer may be revived, but any strikes they have previously gained will remain. And obviously a killer dies upon loss. Now here's the question, what is a loss? For my rule set, a loss is if 1 or more survivors escape after 5 generators have been completed. If they escape through the hatch or the gate, does not matter. So if we get into a situation where 2 survivors are alive and 1 gen remains, and I hook the second survivor, but the first survivor doesn't go for the unhook and completes a generator and then escapes through the hatch before I find it, but they have completed the last generator, it will count as a loss for the killer, and the killer will die. But if I manage to close the hatch at 1 gen remaining, or any gen remaining, and the last survivor escapes, if I let them escape, or if they just escape through the gate, it is counted as a win, and it will also be counted as a 4K in the stats tracker because, well, I could have slugged the last survivor, but it would have taken a while. Something like that. But if it's obvious that they would have escaped even if I had slugged, then it'll only count as a 3K. There's a little bit of a give and take here. And the survivor will be counted as 1 hook, no matter how many times they were hooked prior. So if I never hooked that survivor and they escaped through the hatch, I'll only count it as 1 hook state to my stats. So if I'm on 9 hooks because I've hooked all the 3 other survivors 3 times, and the last survivor escapes through the hatch without ever being hooked, I'll have had 10 hooks that game. If I let them escape through the hatch, that is. If I don't actively slug to try and find them still. I will not count hook states. I will only count hooks, so actually hook actions. In addition, if 2 survivors remain and 1 is downed while 2 or more gens are left, I can hook that survivor and count the game as a 4K if the other survivor escapes. It's basically the same rule, because I could easily get the 4K, but it would take some time and some slugging to do, and that's not fun for the survivors, and it's just tedious for me. Additionally, if a survivor disconnects and the bot that remains is the only survivor to escape after 5 gens are completed, it will instead count as a strike to killer and not a loss, because the survivor disconnected. And it is sort of a non-factor rule because I don't think the bots will ever escape, because they're relatively easy to catch, and I'll probably just kill the bot and then move on with the game as normal. But if it somehow happens, it will count as a strike, and to add to the strike thing, 3 strikes, just like in baseball, and you're out. So 3 strikes and the killer dies. Now, if the survivors give up in any way, shape, or form, for instance, every survivor stops playing or wants to farm. For instance, think of the Baby Killer series with the animatronic, where in the Adept game, the survivors immediately gave up after their first survivor who hooked went to 2nd stage and then ran into me. It is an automatic win for the killer, and I'll just count it as many hooks as I got before they gave up, plus 1 per survivor. Also, with one of the updates back in the day, over the last year, the abandon feature entered the game, so that survivors can abandon the match and save some time when they are all slugged, or if they haven't managed to complete a generator in 10 minutes and the generators have not been regressing at all, and the abandon option becomes available for the killer, I can abandon the game to save time. So let's say 3 survivors remain, I down all 3 of them, and they all abandon the match, so it's now only bots against me. I can also, instead of hooking them all once, I can abandon the match as well, just count 3 hooks, and move on to the next game, and it'll still be a win. This is obviously just to save time. I don't think it'll ever really happen, and if I abandon, I'll still count it as like 1 hook per each survivor. Like I said, each killer has 1 life, so we have a total of 40 lives currently, with Trapper all the way to Springtrap. And when the new killer comes out, it'll be 41 with Trapper all the way to the Cross Sue. What is my goal with this? Well, I've been hinting at it for a little bit. It's to see how many wins in a row I can get combined on the whole roster, and which killer, combined with some restrictions, I can get the highest win streak on, get the most kills on, something along those lines, with some limited restriction. But the main goal is to learn and improve, get better at each killer, get better at the game in general. And I've said that I want to track some things, and this is what I will track. I will track the amount of kills I get, the escapes and generators completed. So if a killer loses by 2 survivors escaping through the gate after 5 gens have been completed, it'll count as 2 escapes. Hatch escapes and stuff I will not count. It'll still count as a 4K, like I said before. If a survivor gets the second chance escape through the hatch, if all other survivors are dead, it'll still count as a 4K and a win. Any hook counts as 1 hook, and a finisher Mori also counts as 1 hook. Very obvious. That's also what I'll check. I'll track the wins. Obviously, it's a streak, so the overall and the killer specific streak. So I could have an overall overall wins at 50, and then have like 3 wins on 1 killer, 5 on another, and I'll keep track of all of that. What I also want to keep track of is the most common perks I use and the most common maps and realms I play on, in addition to which specific survivor escaped. So the characters, not the players. But let's say I've lost 3 killers so far, and I check and I see every killer has lost to a Sable. And then I might have to reevaluate how nice I am to Sable players when they clearly don't deserve it. That's a joke, by the way. And when survivors escape, I'll also keep track of what perks the escaping survivor had, and which perk was ultimately the most common among the escapees. And then also which maps the survivors escaped on and were killed on. This is obviously hand to hand with tracking the maps and realms, to see which map was my most deadliest map and which was the map that I most struggled on. Also, I'll track the stats on each specific killer of how many gens they lost, how many hooks they got, and who had the least escapes. I'll still, in the stats, and you'll see that in a moment, I'll still count it if somebody got a hatch escape, but I'll still count it as a 4K. But I'll also keep track of hatch specific escapes. So if a survivor escapes through hatch before all generators have been completed. And I just want to keep track of how many blood points I earn per match, and on average to see which killer I performed the best on in terms of blood points, and maybe see which killer I should use for blood point farming. These are all the rule sets, and to cap it off, I want to show you this. This is my little Google sheet, and on here I'll have a tracker for how many games I'm on, which killer I played, the 4 perks I used, the map that was played, the realm that was played on, how many generators were completed, how many kills I got, how many hook actions I performed, how many hatch escapes, if somebody escaped through the gate. To preface this, if I close the hatch and I let the survivor escape through the gate, or I don't catch the survivor before they escape through the gate, it'll still count as a hatch escape. And then also blood points earned and whether it was a win or a loss. I'm hoping for a lot of green bars and just 1 red bar somewhere, and not like a loss streak of a couple matches, which would be horrible. And that's all I'll keep track of. And that is what the premise of the streak is. How will I select which killer I play? I've been thinking about that. Sometimes I'm feeling like playing a specific killer. Sometimes I might have a tome challenge that requires me to play a specific killer, because I'm still working on getting all my tomes done. And sometimes I'll just let a random wheel decide which killer I play, or maybe even a viewer in my stream. If you're interested to see when I'm streaming, I have no set schedule because my life is very busy and it's not... I don't have like a schedule that I keep to. It switches around pretty much every week. I live very flexibly, and I think I have to in my line of work. And so if you're ever interested, head to twitch.tv and look for Hi, I'm Fynnion. You'll also find a link in the description below, and I do believe also on my channel itself. Just drop me a little follow and you'll get notified when I go live, and maybe you can come check me out and watch me play Killer live. With that being said, thank you all for watching. Make sure to check out the playlist if you stumbled upon this video randomly, and I hope to see you in my future streams and in this streak. Cheers guys, and see you next time. Out of my cage.